Welcome to the Brain Picker Pro Show, live from Lake Wiley, South Carolina, in my office, not home office, in my office, and all the way down in Florida. A good friend. I've known him for many years, and he's a full-time real estate investor. He does virtual investing. He does rehabs, lease options, wholesale. He does the whole gamut. And I've been wanting to get him on for a long time. So please give a warm welcome to my good friend, Glenn Goss. What's going on, buddy?
Oh man, Larry, it's great to be in South Florida. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor and a privilege, and always enjoy chatting with you.
That's awesome, man. I'm really excited for you. I mean, you're living the dream, the real estate investor's dream, right? Because so many guys get out there and they want to build a huge organization and they're tied down to it. And before we started recording, you were telling me a little bit about your day and the things that you're able to do in your day. And I'm like, man, that is awesome. I love that. First of all, you're retired law enforcement. So thanks a lot for your service. We appreciate that. That's really awesome. That really is. And but now you're a full-time real estate investor and slash stay-at-home dad too, right?
Yes, I am, Larry, and I hesitate to say full-time real estate investor because that's what I do, but I hardly do it full-time, and that's by design. For 30 years, as you mentioned, I had a full-time career. I was happy to serve. I had a great career. I started at the bottom. I worked my way to the top in my profession, and upon retiring, and actually before I retired, I started dabbling in real estate investing on a personal level, and I just had an affinity for it, and I love it, and I've been very blessed during my entire adult life, and I'm even talking about going back to my teens of going to work every day and doing what I enjoy to do. Even when I started out working as a teenager in a gas station, to putting my way through college, to joining the police force, and now in retirement, I've had a great work life, and I hope to have many more years.
That is awesome. That's great. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in real estate.
Well, interestingly enough, I just decided while I was serving that I wanted to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial. I've always had it in my blood. My father raised 5 children selling cars, so as you can imagine, it's always feast or famine, working on commission, and he did that back in the 60s and the 70s and even into the 80s. And I think I picked up that part of him that you like to make the deal work and make it a win-win. And even though I chose a career in law enforcement, I've always had a yearning to do something a little bit more sales or market oriented and entrepreneurial. Unfortunately, I was able to actually start dabbling in real estate toward the latter part of my career. And interestingly enough, I actually started out by bridging real estate deals. I found that people working with me, even people working for me or in other departments, wanted to buy a bigger home, but they hadn't sold their current home, and they were in that little catch-22 situation where they didn't have the deposit. So I actually started out doing bridge loans or lease options on their properties to get them their deposit so they can buy the home they want and lease option me the home that they want to sell. I would literally buy the home and then turn around and resell it, obviously, for a profit. And everything was above board. They knew what I was doing. I knew what they wanted. And I literally started doing what I call credit card deals. I was able to leverage my own credit to do that. One property turned into 5. Word got around what I was doing, and that's how I actually got my start.
That's awesome. That's really good. That's good. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, because you've evolved over the years. And Glenn, I got to tell you, I mean, I know a lot of, and I probably never even told you this, but I just hear some of the lines that you say and some of the lines you use, and you know I'm a pretty good negotiator. But man, I got to tell you, I love some of the stuff you tell people that you say and how you negotiate with them. Even before we started recording, you were talking about what you were telling the neighbor across the street on the house you just bought. You know, so I love some of the lines you use. It's awesome, and you're really a good negotiator. You really are. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So tell our listeners a little bit about what
I
you
owe
do.
that to 2 forces in my life. My father, because I considered him to be a great negotiator, and also 30 years in law enforcement. If you're going to be successful, sometimes you need to talk your way out of situations as much as you want to talk yourself into situations. And you learn that words matter, and listening is more important than talking.
That's really good. That is really good. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. Now you are doing, I mean, you're living the dream. You're down in Florida. It's a hot market down there. It's tough to get deals, and I'm a firm believer, and you are too. You've got to roll with the changes. You can't be trying to buy properties at deep discounts to wholesale them if you're in a really really hot market, if you don't want to deal with the competition. So you have to change your model, you have to change your strategy, and sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone and even go out of your own geographic area. So tell our listeners a little bit about that.
Well, first off, I couldn't agree more with what you said, and I'm glad that you asked me that because at the end of the short story that I'm going to tell you, that's actually how you and I ended up meeting. Going back to post recession 2008, 2009, where I think every real estate investor probably cooled their heels a little bit. Nobody saw what the bottom was. When I decided to jump back in closer to 2010, after taking a little bit of a hiatus. I decided to start looking in areas outside of South Florida for two reasons. First off, as you mentioned, it is a very hot market, even in a recession type of economy. Secondly, I couldn't see the bottom, and inherently properties are more expensive down here than they are, for example, in your neck of the woods.
Right.
So when I started looking around, I just started checking out, for example, North Carolina, and I noticed that houses very similar to, for example, my neighborhood were selling for maybe a third to a half of what I was paying here. So what I decided to do was I just decided for the first 6 or 8 months to kind of paper trade, if you will, houses. If I would have bought the house here, what did it sell for there? And I started making a list of people or contacts that I made. And ultimately, that led me to buy my first property, I think back in 2010, the same year, in North Carolina. And what I did is I bought a typical bread and butter home in a good neighborhood, as you like to say, not a war zone. It could be a blue collar neighborhood. It could be an upper middle class neighborhood. It really doesn't matter as long as it's a neighborhood where people can work and play and raise their families and live a good life. And I actually bought that property. I renovated it and I sold it. But what's more important is what I learned along the way. Within a few months of buying that property, I started getting those yellow cards in the mail from other real estate investors. So what I did was I started building my team. When I would call them up and ask them, I would, again, listen to what they have to say. And I would say, for example, hey, by the way, I'm looking for somebody to maintain my lawn. Can you recommend anybody? One thing about real estate investors, Larry, and I think you know this, is that they're always willing to help out other investors. They want to help. They're in the business as much to help as they are to make a profit. So I would ask the same question about closing attorneys or realtors that are friendly to brokers. I started taking names, as they say in my former business, take some names, take some phone numbers, make some phone calls. And over time, I was able to build up a team of people all the way up to general contractors, closing attorneys, property appraisers, property inspectors to help me evaluate my deals long distance as I started looking and buying more properties. One property turned into three turned into 10, and so on and so forth.
Right.
And I decided to stay with a niche. I wanted to stay with single family homes. That's my niche. I was comfortable with it. And since that time, since between then and now, I would venture to guess that I'm probably close to buying and selling, having bought and sold upwards of 80 or 90 houses in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area, all the way down in South Carolina in your area, and even east into Carolina as well. So,
Sweet.
And again, building my team the further I get out. So real estate investing long distance shouldn't be scary. As a matter of fact, people should view it as an opportunity, particularly if they're in a metropolitan area like myself.
Right. That is great. So you've done close to 100 deals up here in the Carolinas from South Florida, and you built your team by every person you talk to in the area. You ask for referrals. You ask for what you're needing at the time, whether it be a closing attorney or a landscaper or a contractor or an electrician or a property manager or whatever. That is awesome. I love that. I love that. So
Absolutely.
So
And it does require talking to quite a few people, but you can get a good feel for the people over the phone, especially, again, I think my background serves me well there too, but I did all this through phone, fax, FedEx, and email. I didn't use, as we're using now, Skype. I kept it simple. I kept it basic. And a lot of people probably feel the same way, where they don't want to get tied down with video conferences and things like that. My message to the people watching this, your students, anybody else out there, is keep it simple.
Right. That is great. Now, what kind of deals are you doing up this way? You're long distance, you're doing virtual investing. What kind of deals are you doing? Fix and flips, lease options, wholesaling, or what?
In your area, I'm doing fix and flips. And I'm doing those and I'm enjoying those. But in my area down here, I'm starting to branch out back into lease options where I got my start. So I'm doing both.
You know, that brings up a really good point. I mentioned about you have to roll with the changes with the market. You have seen that this market up here, you can still get properties to fix and flip, but in your area, I'm sure it's much more difficult to get fix and flips. So that's probably the reason you moved back over to lease options. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head. We're dealing with a couple different forces, and I'm sure people watching this, whether you're in Los Angeles or Dallas or New York, uh, any market that is a higher retail value market, you're going to have a lot of variables involved with respect to other real estate investors, people that say they're real estate investors, and as I like to say, you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince.
Right.
And quite frankly, at this stage of my life, and as we mentioned earlier, I'm not really into. I'm into the time value of money. That's my thing. I don't want to spend a lot of time chasing or finding a deal. So what I'm doing in North Carolina wouldn't work for me down here unless I wanted to work 8 or 9 hours a day. And I'm not saying that the way I'm doing it, somebody else can't do it better or smarter. That's just my perspective. So I like to stick with what I'm doing down here right now is, for example, as I mentioned to you before we got on, about a property across the street from me, very similar situation where an owner wasn't living there anymore, decided he wanted to sell the house, and we had struck up a conversation over several months, and he would catch me working on my yard or washing or waxing my car, and finally he decided that it would be better to go with me than to hire a real estate agent, and he got the price that he was looking for his house, and I was able to resell it on a lease option and make some money in the middle. It wouldn't make as much, for example, as fixing and flipping my own property. But then again, I didn't have hundreds of hours into the deal or even a dozen hours into the deal. It was probably a 3 or 4 hour deal from beginning to end, and it worked out great.
That's great. So basically, what you're doing, since you're in a hot market, you can give him his price by structuring it based on your terms by doing what you would call a sandwich lease option, right?
Correct. Correct. A sandwich lease option and an assignable lease option, and as you know, and many of your students would know, you're using two different contracts: one to purchase the property on a lease option, which is one contract, and one to sell the property on a lease option, which is very important that you do a lease and an option purchase contract. There are two separate contracts when you're actually representing the property as the buyer or as the assignor. Not to get too technical, and I know you talk about this in your courses, but you can do it pretty simply, and you have the documents, on your websites and your courses to do this. And quite frankly, people can Google them to get them as well, but better to talk to somebody who's done it before. But it's really not that difficult. In this particular case, I have no money into the deal. The money I use to secure the property, I actually receive from the person that's buying the property from me. And when they close on the property, I'm in the middle. I get paid the difference, and the title attorney handles everything else. And as you know, my lease option on the property is longer than the lease option on the property that I had afforded to the person that's buying the house from me. So basically what I like to say is I'm in a round room. I can't be boxed into a corner on this. I got plenty of time to change up my strategy if, in fact, the people that are currently renting the property don't actually execute the option to purchase it. I can actually turn around and do the whole thing again and have plenty of time without being financially responsible for the property.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's just a prime example of how you have learned to adjust your investing to the current market. So, how are you getting deals in your market and up here in the Carolinas as well? How are you finding deals?
Again, let's talk about South Florida. I'm keeping it simple. As I mentioned to you before we got on, I drive my son just started high school, and his high school is a little bit further away than the school he went to. So, invariably, a few times a week, I'm driving by for rent signs or for sale signs, and I'd only look for rent for sale by owner. And when I'm on the way driving him to school or picking him up or anywhere in between, or even throughout my day, whether I'm going to the gym or whether I'm running errands, I'll stop, take a snapshot of the sign on my trusty mobile phone, take a snapshot of the house. If the house is nearby, sometimes the phone's along the street versus in front of the property, and then I'll make some phone calls in the afternoon or the next day for that matter.
Right.
I'm finding my deals that way. I don't call right away. If the sign's new, I usually put it in my hip pocket for a week or two because I don't want to be the first person calling on the property.
Sure.
One sign that it's actually it's funny you should ask me this because I actually was reviewing my photos from about a month ago, and I actually forgot to make a phone call on a property. So I decided to drive that way a couple days ago, and sure enough, the sign was still out there. So it was perfect. So when I called up the owner of the property, he was more than happy to hear from me
I bet so.
because he had not sold his property yet. So we're actually negotiating a deal on that property right now.
You know what, Glenn? It's a lot of people really don't believe that you can get somebody that wants to sell their property to lease option it to you. But it's really not as difficult as somebody would think. You just really have to ask, don't you?
You have to ask, but I also added another arsenal to my weapon. I went back to my roots, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. That I asked, well, are you looking to buy, for example, are you looking to buy another house? What are you going to do when you sell this house? I keep the
Right.
questions open ended. And if they say, well, for example, if they say, well, my wife really, or my husband for that matter, really has this house that we want to buy, but we need to sell ours first. I said, you know what? I think I can help you with that. And what I do is I go back to the same premise as actually how I got my start in this business, which is, well, what if I could actually give you the equity that you're going to get from your property when you sell it now and lease your property back from you, so the bank is satisfied that you have a tenant in the property. That way you can buy your house now versus maybe you losing that property down the line because you haven't sold your house yet.
Right. There you go. Sweet strategy. I love it.
And then I do the most important thing, and one of the things I learned from you, I stop talking. Because invariably they're going to say, wow, can you tell me more? Wow, that's great. How can you do that? It doesn't really matter what they say. What are they going to say? No. If they say no, I don't want to speak to them anyway because they're
Right.
not open-minded.
Right.
So I can move on.
Right.
Just move on.
I love it. I love it. That's great. So, how are you finding your deals up in the Carolinas?
Mostly referrals at this point, to be very candid with you. I'm not looking on Craigslist anymore. I used to, for example, look on Craigslist. And back when I was up there, you didn't have other apps like OfferUp and Let's Go and things like that, which is a great source for finding properties, I might add,
Right.
particularly
They are
OfferUp.
now. Yeah, absolutely.
And I bought a few properties off there, but not right now. I don't have to because I'm getting emails and phone calls from everybody, from bird dogs that I have up there to other real estate investors that maybe don't have the cash to do a property, that want to partner up on a deal, or maybe just sell the contract to me, assign a contract over to me, and I'll be happy to buy if there's money in the deal for everybody. I have a couple of investor-friendly brokers, one in particular, Patty, who's been phenomenal finding deals for me. And I've actually even had a couple of title attorneys call me where a deal fell through and it was an investor type of deal, and they would call me and ask me if I was interested because I closed properties with them. And that brings me to a real important point. If you're giving somebody business, never, ever be afraid to ask them for business in return. If you're giving money to a title attorney who's making money off of your closings, don't be bashful. Ask them, hey, look, if you have some deals that fall apart, maybe you can, throw them my way. I'd really appreciate the business.
That's great. That is really good.
Mhm.
Especially, I really like what you said. If you're giving them business, they feel a reciprocation.
Follow your dollar.
I love it, man. I love it. I love it. That's great. So, tell us a little bit about. I know you've been big on the past in private money. A lot of people watching this podcast getting started in real estate, they're using private money or need private money to get started. Do you mind sharing a little bit about private money and how you find private money and how you structure that?
Um, Yeah, I don't mind sharing it with you at all. And I want to add a little caveat to that, that we could talk a little bit about leveraging your own capital, HELOCs, and things like that, because the economy, as we know, the economy is churning right now. Banks
Right.
are eager to lend their money. So we'll say that one if we can follow up on that, I bet, because that's what I'm doing now as well. But
Sure.
with respect to private investing, I have a core group of investors around me that are people that I know or have come to know, professionals, maybe again, people that I have given my business to, for example, dentists and other actually a title attorney that I use down here actually invested with me as well in some of my out of state deals because he likes what I'm doing. He likes the returns. So these are not private. These are not private lenders. These are private money people where you can pay them single digit returns. And I keep it very straightforward. When I buy a property, I use private money anywhere between, and I pay between 7 and 9%. Some people, I think, like yourself, think that maybe I should pay a little bit less, but I like giving my private money investors a good return. I do it in a way where I structure the deal where they have absolute certainty that their money is going into the property.
Right.
For example, without getting too technical, when I buy a property, I do a standalone LLC for that property under my umbrella corporation, and I do up a simultaneous partnership agreement, not a loan agreement, but a partnership agreement with my private investors, so they know that they are in control of the money of the deal, but I'm in control of as a managing partner to make the deal happen. So I think checks and balances when you're asking if you're going to, for example, approach friends and family or close business associates, you need to structure it in a way where if you're going to ask them to invest in you, that they understand that the collateral is not only in you, but it's in the property as well. Now, maybe that got a little bit too technical or too far afield from what you're asking, but again, don't be bashful. People want to make returns on their money. They're not making it in the bank, and a lot of people don't have the time, interest, or expertise to go out and buy and sell their own properties or do lease options. They just want to earn 7, 8, 9% on their property, on their money.
That's really good. I really like what you said with the accountability and creating a separate LLC. It could be in a series LLC or something like that, but where they actually have ownership and they feel that pride, and it makes them want to do that. So when they're at parties, they're telling friends, hey, I'm a real estate investor. I invest in real estate. They're not just a lender. They're an investor. And then I'm sure just by doing that one little thing, which, it lets them be more of an investor instead of a passive lender, I'm sure it's probably gotten you some referrals.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there is some ownership obviously in the deal, and you're absolutely right. You couldn't have, I couldn't have said it better. They feel more involved in the process and not just somebody that's lending money. They can actually say, I'm a real estate investor by being so very passive in the deal. They're stakeholders, for to put it differently.
Right.
And that's one of the ways that I do that. But I've actually come across, I've actually added a little value added to that whole situation, as I mentioned to you a few minutes ago. And as you know, property values have gone up. Banks are choking with money that they want to lend out, particularly to people that are creditworthy.
Right.
I've actually worked with some of my investors and said, well, instead of using your own money, how about using your bank's money? And again, I stopped talking. And then they ask me, well, how can I do that? And so when you have a first mortgage on your property, but your property's gone up $150,000 or $200,000, I said, how about I show you how to get a HELOC on your property where you're not over leveraging your property, and you can borrow the money from the bank at 3.5% and lend it to me at 7 or 8%. And not so you're making a profit off of money that's not even yours.
Yeah, a profit off the bank's money.
A profit off the bank's money. Your profit is less. However, it's not money that you have to take out of wherever you have it right now. I'll be happy to use that money too.
Right.
But why not make from 4 to 6% on somebody else's money, and your payments are only going to be interest only until we close the deal. As a matter of fact, if you don't want to make those payments, I'll make them. For me, it's a lot cheaper to make somebody's HELOC or home equity line of credit interest only payment than it is to make a monthly 9% payment, which I typically don't do anyhow. Everybody gets paid on the back end of the deal, their principal and their interest. With my private investors, with private lenders, you have to pay monthly, as you know. You lend that money, you're a hard money lender. But so in addition to their own money, they have another source of money. The bank's happy, they're happy, I'm happy, everybody's happy.
It's win-win-win all the way around.
That's what you have to look for.
There you go. So where would a person go to find some of these private money lenders? I know I've always preached in the past, you don't ask people for private money. You ask people who they know that would like to earn 8 to 10% or whatever. But what are some of the sources you would recommend people look for to find some private money sources?
Well, you do a very good job, Larry, in your course and in your Brain Picker Pros and podcast about how people can cast a wide net and put ads on, for example, Craigslist, or as I mentioned, there's another app out there called Nextdoor. I don't know if you have it up in your area, but it's phenomenal down here. Nextdoor, Craigslist. So you can do those things and you'll get good returns. But I have to get back to what I said before. For somebody starting out, like I said, keep it really simple. Follow your dollar. Everybody, most people, God willing, they go to the dentist, they go to the doctor. Invariably, especially if you're going into a new dentist or doctor or another professional, they're going to ask you, what do you do? Well, I'm a real estate investor. Well, they ask, well, what do you do? So I buy and sell single family houses. All right. Lend money out. As a matter of fact, I've got more inventory of properties coming in that I have money to buy. Do you know anybody that would be interested in earning, high single or double digits on their money to invest? And invariably, they'll say, well, I might be interested. Well, let's grab some. Don't talk to them about it while you're in the chair, for goodness sake. But, especially if you're getting a cavity filled, it doesn't work out too good. But you can, for example, set up a time to meet for coffee, and whatever you do, and don't meet in their office. Meet somewhere neutral. Meet at a coffee house or somewhere where you are peers, where you're equal, because professionals like that have money to invest. They typically have financial planners and advisors. They run a business, but at the same time, they're entrepreneurial and they want to make money. And if you can show them a good deal, they recognize a good deal. They may turn you on to other people as well. Invariably, it's worked for me, and I do exactly what you mentioned. I said, if it's somebody I don't know, do you know anybody? But to be very candid with you right now, I have people really coming to me at this point. A lot of people know what I do. People have introduced me to other people, and I'm 3 or 4 levels deep right now. People that I've met through other people that I've worked with or collaborated with, and it's working out really well. It just takes a little time, but my advice would be is it's like baseball. Focus on your singles and doubles before you focus on the fence.
That's really good. That is really good. I love it, and I love the advice that you said. Don't meet at their office. Meet at a neutral area so your peers. Instead of you're at their office and it's like you're pitching them. You don't want that to happen. You want it to look like your peers back and forth, and you both have something to bring to the table, right?
Exactly. I have a golden rule that I live by. If I feel at any point in a conversation that I feel like I am now trying to sell somebody something, I stop. I just stop. It doesn't really matter how bad I want it, how bad I want to establish a relationship. I feel that I am not in sales. I am in real estate investing, and if it gets to the point, and that's true with anything, if whether it's a conversation about politics or whether it's a conversation about life or whether it's a conversation about real estate investing, if you feel that you're trying to convince somebody of something, it's been my experience that if you stop talking about it, change the topic, they're the ones that are going to bring it back up, because quite frankly, that's counterintuitive. People think that they have, it's kind of like the old saying, if you're in a hole, stop digging. Yeah. So, and people respect people that can put down a shovel versus continue to dig a hole.
Right. That's a great point. That is a really good point. I love that. I've also noticed it's like the more you have a takeaway, well, I don't really know if this is the right thing for you. It may or may not be the right thing for you. If you do a little bit of takeaway, then they start selling you on letting them in the deal, right?
Correct. It's again very counterintuitive, but if people can just adults, I should say, can go back and think about how they were successful in kindergarten before we were indoctrinated into this intuitive thought versus counterintuitive.
Right.
And what I mean by that is listen more, talk less. Don't worry, be happy. Things will happen. It always does. When you speak less and you listen more, people respect that, because let's face it, the vast majority of people just don't do that anymore.
That is true. There's a book. It's been around for many years. I have it on one of my bookshelves somewhere. That it's called Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Exactly. I read the same book, and that's why I made the reference. As a matter of fact, I think I see the book on the top left-hand corner right next to all of your accolades and your self-written books and your anyway.
That's funny. That is awesome. So, Glenn, this has been awesome, man. This is really good stuff. So what's next for Glenn? What are you doing now?
The same thing. I really don't have to do anything different. My only advice to people that are working that think that they don't have time to do it, I just make the time. Keep it. Set aside 30 minutes a day to read an article. Pick up a good book. Read one of your books, for example. Paper trade, as I say, as if you're buying stocks. Follow a house. You don't have to jump right into it. I mean, unless you're in dire straits and you need to make some money, then obviously, jump in and pick up the deals where you can. But if you're working full time and you want life after the career that you're in, start now, start slow, start with small goals and objectives, and you'll achieve them. And just eventually, the compounding effect of what you do will come back to reward you. 90% of your success yields 10% of your success. By the time you get to the 90% point of actually doing something, that's when everything starts to compound and everything starts to click and roll in. And maybe that was just a little bit too philosophical, but put the work in now, whether it's an hour a day, an hour a week, 5 hours a week, and eventually it will not take you nearly as much time to do what you were doing in the beginning. It'll compound. The learning curve will diminish, and you'll be set.
That's true. I call that short-term pain for long-term gain.
I could not agree more. I had another analogy. It's called a hyacinth lily. If you ever seen hyacinth lilies on a lake,
Uh-huh.
they have a 30-day lifespan cycle, and you really don't see the lake get covered until day 28 or 29. But what you see for the first 27 or 28 days was a lily here, a lily there, a lily here, maybe a couple of patches over there, and then literally overnight, the compounding effect covers the lake.
Wow.
Interesting about hyacinth lily. It's a great. If everybody wants to look it up, it's a great lesson in the value of compounding, the compounding effect.
That's great. That's really good stuff, man. Hey, Glenn, if somebody wanted to reach out to you for something, what do you need? What could people reach out to you for? I mean, you got the platform here. Whatever you want to ask for, if anybody's looking for this or needs this or has this, reach out to me, and feel free to give out your contact info if you want to.
Oh, well, that's actually very generous of you. You caught me a little off guard on that one. I would say that, of course, if there are, particularly in your area, because I have my network up there, or if anybody, for example, needs any help down here in Southeast Florida, there's a deal you're working down here, you want to bounce it off me, first and foremost, I'll be happy to help. I'll be happy to speak to you and give you any tips that I can give you. But the caveat there is I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a real estate broker. I'm a real estate investor. I'm not an attorney. I don't give out legal advice. I can just give you my experience as a real estate investor. So I'll be happy to do that. If somebody has a deal that they're struggling with financially, a house that they have under contract, or they have a lease option that's going sideways on them that they want to get out of, and get out of a way where it's good for them and good for me, certainly I'd be happy to do that. As far as my contact information, I would just say that best way at this point, because I keep Skype on, is my Skype. Just give me a call.
Awesome, and they can look you up on Skype by your name.
Yeah, Glenn F Goss.
Okay, good.
But actually, you know what? I don't mind. I'll tell you. Might as well just give you my email address while I'm here as well. And again, I'm flattered that you would ask. DelrayG@gmail.com. That's the city I live in. Delray Beach. It's Delray, DELRAYG @gmail.com. Or just Skype me at Glenn F Goss, GLENNFGOSS.
Awesome. Glenn, I can't tell you how much I really appreciate you taking the time. I mean, I know you got a lot of time on your hands because you are a successful real estate investor, but I really appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us today. Thank you so much. It's been a blessing. It's been great, and you're a great guy, and I really appreciate all you do and your willingness to always help. I know you've reached out to me multiple times over the years to help me in my business in different ways, and it means a lot, and you're a guy who really likes to give back, and I appreciate that, and it means a lot.
Oh, my pleasure. Again, my honor and privilege to be on, and I wish you and everybody at the office and your family much success.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot for being on. I really appreciate it, Glenn.
Great.
Thanks a lot.